Whether you want to be or not, I think we've established you are a leader, all right? And so since you're a leader, one of the things I want to start with is, as leaders, we have to make the choice to be a leader every day. I mean, every day there has to be a conscious choice, right? That I'm going to step into this role as a leader. I mean, since I've been a parent, it's every day when my son wakes up, I'm reminded, right? If I happen to forget, I'm reminded that I have a responsibility. I have a responsibility as a leader. I have a responsibility as a parent. But not just that, I'm a husband, right? So I have a responsibility as a leader and provider in my home. And so whether I make the choice or not, that's the case. But there's something powerful about intentionally choosing whatever it is your circumstance or situation may be, right? So in terms of leadership, it's the exact same thing. Right now, I know there are leaders who are tired. There are pastors. I was talking to a pastor in the barbershop yesterday, and he asked me, he said, so where you going to church on Sunday? And I said, I'll be honest with you. Of all the days that I can go to church, Easter's probably the Sunday that I really don't want to go because of the crowds, and it's just it's a lot happening, right? And he started chuckling. We both started chuckling. He was like, believe it or not, me either, right? He was like, but I got to choose to be there, because that's what good leaders do. Despite the circumstance, they choose leadership, right? So, number one, you're a leader, whether you want to be or not. Okay, I don't care what age you are. I'm watching my son now. He's little under 2 years old. He'll be 2 in June. Talking to the teachers at his school, and they say, hey, Legend, he's quite the personality. And he leads his peers, right? Even at that age, he's exerting a certain amount of influence, right? There are 5-year-olds who can step into a classroom and exert a certain amount of influence. They're having a ripple effect. They're leaders. Same thing with us. So we have to make the choice consciously to choose leadership every day. I'm going to ask you a different question, more provocative question that's outside of yourself. What do we want from our leaders? See, because when I sit and tell you that you're a leader, and a lot of things start coming to your mind, right? Because when you think of the responsibility of leadership, it's difficult not to have some type of emotional reaction to that if you're a responsible leader. But then there's also an expectation of leadership. And when I turn the question around and I say, what do you want from your leader? I want you to, and here's a great exercise for anybody, right? If you're being led actively, and for anyone who is in a leadership position. The best exercise that you can ever take on is to write down what you believe your leadership competencies are and your responsibilities as a leader. Okay? But then on the other side of the paper, what you do is you write down what you want from a leader. Here are the things that I want from a leader. And then a simple exercise is to match it up, right? In terms of how I hold myself to the standard of leadership, am I doing that? Am I doing the things that I would require of my leader? Because as human beings, we have this interesting way of being where, I will require more of someone leading me than I will require of myself as a leader. And of course, that's if I'm not the type of leader who is constantly looking to learn, constantly looking to take myself to the next level. All right. So that's a phenomenal exercise. One side of the page. What do I require of myself as a leader? And then the other side of the page, what do I want from my leader? Match it up. See what the discrepancies are. Because ultimately, what matters is that I'm doing, at a minimum, what I would require of another leader. So first and foremost, one of the main responsibilities of a leader is to provide strategic solutions. I mean, think about it. Any television show you watch, any action movie you watch, any sitcom that you watch that has a little problem that they need to solve, basically the leader in that scenarios, their particular responsibility at that time is to provide some strategic solution. So what is the strategic solution to whatever the problem may be, or whatever it is, the initiative that they're looking to lead? Okay. Now, I want to offer a way of looking at building out strategic solutions in terms of what leaders need to know around providing strategy. And it's a three-pronged approach. Number one, what happened in the past? What are the indicators of the past that as you form your strategic approach, as you form your strategy, you must take into account to ensure that as you're moving forward, you've accounted for the things that you already know will happen and have happened, right? So the past. Any competent leader has to have a healthy respect for history. Their history, the history of the organization, the history of the industry, the history of the world, depending on what it is, right? These are the things that leader should know. You should understand your history. You should look to the history to see the patterns of what will happen in the future. The future is number two. Okay. So not only am I concerned with the past and understanding the past as a leader and making decisions with the past in mind, but then I'm also saying, okay, where do we want to go in terms of creating what's next? Where do we want to go, and what is the vision for that thing? One of the main competencies of a leader has to be vision. As a matter of fact, a leader who does not have vision typically does not have a following. If you don't have a vision for the future, something that you're looking to create that the people are enrolled in, it's very likely you don't have a following. All right. Now, what's the third thing? So the past, the future. The other one is understanding the now, understanding the present situation. And this is probably the most difficult part, right? Because the past has happened. Unfortunately, some leaders, they're not really understanding the past like they should today. This is why we see people making the same mistakes over and over, organizations making the same mistake over and over, right? But overall, the past is the easiest part. It's happened. All you have to do is study it. You have to be halfway competent to get that. Okay. But then when you look to the future is based on the vision that you see. And the future is a little more difficult because often the past will dictate what we see in the future. And as a leader, it's my job. It's my job to only use the past as a template to understand the potential pitfalls, the potential barriers, the potential obstacles and situations that we may come up against as we create the vision for the future. The vision for the future has nothing to do with what happened a month ago, 2 years ago. The vision for the future has everything to do with where we should be. Now, when you look at the now, the present, many of us don't understand what's happening. And I'm going to talk about that first in terms of what's happening right now, because even though we're living it, many of us don't really have a full understanding of what's happening right now, and not just what's happening right now, because I might understand how what's happening right now impacts me emotionally, physically, mentally, right? Spiritually. I might know that, but do I have a good understanding of how it's impacting the people that have to be enrolled in the vision that I have for the future? And because of what's going on for them right now, why they may not be so inspired to move forward, why there might be fear to move forward. Understanding the now is a very critical component for setting strategy. All right. Now, when you think about our current, like the current now, our current situation that we face in the business environment, in the church environment, whatever it is that you want to look at, right? As entrepreneurs, as executives, as pastors, as leaders, whatever it may be. Okay. Wherever you come from. One of the things that we know is that we have debt-laden governments. We have growing deficits. We have rising taxes, although they say we get a little bit more back. Okay. If you got a W-2, I would challenge that. All right. Okay. Unemployment is dropping, but what are the indications of that? We discussed last week in particular in detail that only 11% of all North American leaders can be considered effective. We know that there's social unrest in major countries, elections happening in major countries. News break just a moment ago. Egypt has an election coming up this week, and they're looking to extend the term of the current president well past any term that I've known of, right? So these type of things are happening in our environment right now. I'll tell you, one of the things that Americans really struggle with when it comes to now, our current situation, is understanding the now outside of these United States, understanding the global now, understanding what's happening on a world scale. One of the reasons for that is because we're just not plugged into the world. And if you look at regular network television, they're not telling you anything about what's happening in the world unless it's a tragedy. Let something bad happen. Let something that is horrible happen. For instance, the explosion in Sri Lanka, right? Those type of things, man, they will let you know. But let them turn around and do something innovative. Let them turn around and do something that has a significant impact on technology. Let them turn around and do something in government that is groundbreaking. That is taking that government, taking those people to the next level. The likelihood that you will find out that is going on right now is very low. That is why, as leaders, one of the first competencies, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but one of the first competencies we have to have is global intelligence. I'll come back to that. Okay. But now is a very important component of setting the future vision, not in a way that limits you. I want to be clear about that. It shouldn't change the future vision. What it impacts is your strategy for getting where it is that you want to go. All right. So I believe right now we live in an environment that I have dubbed change squared. And I call our environment change squared for a reason. And really today, I mean, it's April 21st, 2019. I think in this environment, the political environment, the business environment, the economic environment, I would be safe to say that we're living in a change cubed environment. What I mean by that is change is happening on top of change, on top of change, on top of change. Almost as soon as you learn something, it's obsolete. As soon as you grab some piece of technology, let it be a cell phone, it's obsolete. If it's not obsolete, something newer, something faster, something better, quote unquote, has replaced it. Okay. And so one of the things that we have to consider as leaders, as being a leader, that I want people, or if I want people to follow me, is that I am leading in a volatile situation. I'm leading during a volatile period of time where change is happening on top of change, on top of change, on top of change. All right. And the last thing, believe it or not, the last competence, I'm not going to say the last competence, but the competence that most leaders focus on that I believe is a mistaken competence is change management. Because change management means that I'm trying to manage something after it's already happened. I'm trying to manage something after it's already happened, or I'm trying to bring in a change into an organization with all these different structures, and I don't even know if that change is going to really work. So instead, because we have people for that, right? We have experts for change management. We have consultants for change management. So I don't think that's a place that a leader should really be focused. You want to bring in the right competencies. You want to bring in the right people, the right experience, right? You want to hire. If I'm an entrepreneur, I want to bring in the right people in my ear who are helping me manage the change around me. But that shouldn't be something I'm focused on. What I should be focused on is anticipating change. Where is the next change going to happen? So instead of always trying to manage change, I should have people for that. Again, I should have people for that. Instead, as a leader that people would want to follow, I should be looking for where I should anticipate change. People ask me, right, all the time, man, why are you doing so much business in Africa? What's so important in Africa? The reason why I'm so interested in Africa is because as a leader, I'm anticipating the change. I'm looking at the past. I know my vision for the future. I understand the environment that we're currently faced with right now. And from that place, the change that I anticipate tells me that the next step, the next answer to many of the problems that we have around the globe is Africa. Anticipating change. In your business today, are you anticipating change and setting a vision that is aligned with what you see based on the change you're anticipating? As a pastor, are you anticipating what's next? Anticipating the needs of your congregation? As a leader, as a deacon, as a minister, are you anticipating what's going to happen for the people next, where you're going to need to be next, what you need to study, the competencies that you need to have right now to navigate the change that's coming next? As an executive, are you looking at change? I was told about a stat recently that shocked me. And what it basically said is only 11% of the companies on the Fortune 500 list in 1955 are on that list today. Only 11% of the companies that were on the Fortune 500 list. These are the strongest companies, the strongest organizations in the United States of America back in 1955. Only 11% of them are still in existence today. Now, I want you to think about that. Only 11%. So if only 11% of the companies that were here in 1955 are still in existence today, that were on the Fortune 500 list, why do you think that is? The reason why these companies are no longer in existence is because they did not anticipate change. We get so caught up in the current situation, the current environment, and what's going on right now. And it's important, don't get me wrong, that as leaders who have a vision for the future, we're not painting a vision that anticipates the change that many of us are astute enough and smart enough to see coming. Here's another one. Because of this, 50%, listen to this, 50% of the companies on the S&P 500 will be replaced in the next decade. 50%. The S&P, right? Standard & Poor's list. 50% of the companies on that list will be replaced in the next 10 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Replaced. So if these companies are going to be replaced, you have to ask yourself a question. Why? Why will these companies be replaced? Why is it that 50%, the prediction that is 50% of these companies will be replaced in this 21st century business environment? And I'll tell you, one of the major reasons why is anticipating change. But the other reason why is that many organizations are stuck and they won't change. When I left corporate America, people ask, man, you sure you want to do that? Are you crazy? I mean, what do you mean, am I crazy? Just because I work in an organization does not mean that I have security. It does not mean that I have job security. Companies are shutting down every day. Why? Because leaders aren't exercising just those three things I talked about: the ability to understand the past, the ability to set a vision for the future, and understanding the current situation of what's happening right now, not just in my space, but all around the world, globally, in a way that will help me set a vision for the future, move forward. And most leaders don't have the competence to anticipate change. When it comes to being able to anticipate the future, here's how the past, I want to give you an example of how the past comes into play. Okay. And this is how the past comes into play. I'm going to give you a really good overview of how to use the past to predict the future. I'm going to go all the way back 5,000 years. No, I'm going to go further than that. I'm going to go back 10,000 years real fast. So the Stone Age, we all know about the Stone Age. There's documentation of the Stone Age. It's documented in the Bible. It's documented in history books. It's documented in archaeological findings. Okay. The Stone Age lasted 5,000 years. 5,000 years. And then behind that came the Bronze and the Iron Age. Now, don't beat me up if you're a historian, but what I'm going to do is couple them together and just call it the Metal Age. All right. So we stopped using stone. We didn't stop using stone, but we moved forward. We innovated and began using metal, and we used metal. The Metal Age was 3,000 years. 3,000 years. Stick with me here. OK. Then we came up on the Middle Ages, also known as the Dark Ages. All right. In the Middle Ages, this is what we call the medieval times. All right. This is during the Crusades and castles and knights and things like that. The Middle Ages lasted 1,500 years. You seen a pattern already? You seen a pattern in terms of how the eras are shortening? Then the Industrial Age came behind medieval times. We went from castles and knights. We went to factories and production. And the Industrial Age lasted 250 years. And believe it or not, it ended. The Industrial Age ended in 1990. And then what came behind that was the Information Age with the advent of the internet. The Information Age came along, and the Information Age is still here, you might say, or it's ending. Now, if you run any type of analysis on these numbers in terms of how they're decreasing, right? Because you know the Stone Age 5,000 years, Metal Age 3,000 years, Middle Age 1,500 years, Industrial Age 250 years. That means the Information Age will last 30 to 35 years. If it started in 1990, that means the Information Age is almost over, folks. Now, remember I said that the number one competency of a leader that people will follow is to anticipate the change. It's number one, right? I also said that any leader, in terms of providing strategic solutions, they need to be able to look at the past and then look at the future, create a vision, but also understand what's happening right now. Now, if you look at what's happening right now, there's a cheapening of human labor. My mother and I, we were driving to Atlanta Monday. She was like, it's crazy. But when I was 20 years old, she was working what you might call a skilled labor role, making $18 to $20 an hour. Now a role like that, people are making $12 to $14 an hour. How does that happen when inflation's going up, folks? How does that happen? There's a cheapening of human labor. But you got to understand it, right? You got to know the past to understand it. When she was talking, I was listening. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Social media has become a dominant medium. Man, I said this before in a speech. I was speaking to a group of HR leaders up in Wisconsin for a big SHRM conference. And I was speaking to these leaders, and one of the things I said is, if you're not on social media, you're doing yourself a disservice. And after the speech, lady came up to me and she was livid. How dare you tell me that I'm hurting myself as a leader? I'm hurting my brand as a leader if I'm not on social media. I don't need to be on Twitter. I don't need to be on Facebook. She just went in. I said, well, look, that's your personal belief. But what I know is that social media is a dominant medium. And if you want to have a dominant force, then you have to know how to use the tool. You want to make sure the tool's not using you. I talked about that a few Sundays ago, but you do know how to use it. You do have to know how to use the tool. And if you don't know how to use the tool, you're going to get left behind. Then here's the other thing. More dollars are going to fewer employees. Lyft just had an IPO. Everybody that works for Lyft now is much wealthier than they've ever been. Lyft also doesn't have that many employees, but they're millionaires. There are more dollars going to fewer people now. You don't believe that? Twitter's net worth, last time I checked, $16 billion. They got 3,000 employees, 3,600 employees. Let me say something to you. When I first got into corporate America, let me go through the rest of these numbers, and I'm going to give you some to contrast. LinkedIn, net worth, $27 billion, 6,000 employees. And it might not make sense yet, but I'm about to share some old numbers with you, okay? Facebook, net worth, 430 to 450 billion. Might be more now because the stock went up. Okay. Employee count, 17 to 18,000. Google, net worth. I don't got to keep going. Here's the point. When I started working for Allstate Insurance, that was one of my first Fortune 500 jobs. Okay, I guess my first Fortune 500 job was Kinko's, but it wasn't a Fortune 500 company back then, and it wasn't FedEx Kinko's. But I was there for a couple of years. Okay, but then after that, I finished up school, got my associate's degree, and I'm like, well, I need to level up. I didn't say that. Actually, my mom told me, you need to level up. So I listened to her, and I got a job at Allstate Insurance Company. Now, Allstate Insurance Company has been a staple in terms of the insurance industry for a long time. Allstate Insurance Company was worth about $4 to $5 billion, and they had 30,000 employees. Let me say that again. Allstate Insurance Company was worth $4 to $5 billion. You just heard these numbers: 15 billion, 27, 28 billion, 430 billion. None of them exceed 20,000 employees. Allstate Insurance, an old school company, had 30,000 employees with a net worth of $5 billion. I left U.S. Cellular back in 2015. In 2015, this is a technology company, right? A cell phone technology company. But I'm just giving you some thoughts. U.S. Cellular was worth $5 billion, 4.5, and they had 6,000 employees, right? And that's a technology company that's not even doing that much, but they have fewer employees. This is why there's a cheapening of human labor. You got to know this. You got to know this. If you have time, I'll tell you why these large corporate companies, why they're slowly eroding. I'll break down for you why they're slowly eroding and why many of them will never, ever be as big and as strong as they were if they happen to survive the next decade. Okay? But I think you get my point. So what's next, folks? If I just share for you history and what's happening right now, what does Linal say is next as an example of how to use this competency for anticipating the future? My man said it right here, Toussaint. Artificial intelligence is coming, people. But it's not just that. That age is behind the next one, bro. You actually jumped 2 eras because I believe the next is the robotic era. It's already here. But then after the robotic era, which, by the way, if the information age is 30 to 35 years, the robotic era might be like, 10? And then behind that is the artificial intelligence era, where everything is doing its own thing. Where I can buy things that do things for me, that can think for me. This is coming. Let the world keep spinning around the sun. It's happening. whether you like it or not, whether you have an emotional reaction to it or not, whether you think it's right or wrong, it's happening. There's so much momentum behind this. You can't stand in front of it and stop it. You stand in front of it and try to stop it, it's just going to run you over. Boom. Flat. That's how it goes. All right. Now, that's just me providing you an example. So if you hadn't been thinking like this, I'm helping you think like this, because if you want to be a leader that people will follow, then these are the kind of things that you need to know. Number two, competency number two of a leader that people will follow is you have to be technically savvy. Let me tell you something. If you want to be a leader with influence nowadays, you want to have influence in the 21st century, where the biggest population in the United States of America are millennials, where the biggest population in Africa are millennials, where the biggest population around the world are millennials. You got to be technically savvy, because how do you think they think? How do you think, what do you think they're using? How are you going to influence them if you don't know anything technical? If you're not keeping pace with technical trends, if you're not recognizing social media's impact on business, on economics, on social justice, on policies, on HR process, on churches, on congregations, on spirituality. Technically savvy. You can sit up here and complain all day about social media. You better get with it. I'm starting to see more pastors than ever on Facebook Live. Why? Because they know that's where the audience is. If they want to have an impact, if they want to be a leader that people will follow, then they know that just like me, just like anybody else, just like any other radio host, they're popping up their cell phones and taking and turning it on and broadcasting to the entire globe. That's the world we live in. You also have to recognize technology's implications on the future of your business, on the future of your congregation, on the future of your company. Technology is going to have an impact. There's a reason why young people aren't engaged in your church. I saw a post the other week said, well, the reason young people ain't going to church no more is because they're not getting entertained. No, that's not true. They're just not going to your church. Because there are other churches that have figured out how to use technology, and that's how young people talk. And so they're going to that church where everything is integrated with technology, where I'm never late because if the pastor starts preaching, I can turn it on in my car. And when I walk in, I know everything that's happening, where I get an email of what's happening, what's going on. I know what the sermon is going to be Saturday night. And then I get a record of the sermon. I don't got to buy a CD. I get a record of the sermon on Facebook that I can watch whenever I want to. I can tune into YouTube. I'm just saying, if your organization is still using email to transmit the most important messages, y'all losing. And you'll be a part of that number of companies that don't last the next decade if you keep it up. I'm just saying, there's more than one way. There's more than one way. Technology, man. And can you use technology to increase your personal capacity? Let me tell you something. I'm more productive now than I've ever been. Right? And part of the reason for that is because I've learned how to use my tools. Right now in front of me is a MacBook Pro. What you're looking at on Facebook is an iPhone 7, right? What I got next to me is a Samsung, right? Even in the studio, we got monitors and the microphones. All the technology is updated. Brand new studio, brand new technology. You got to be able to increase your personal capacity using this technology, because technology is next if you want to be a leader that people will follow. And let me tell you something. You can have all the competencies of effective leadership that I talked about last week. If you didn't catch the show, go back and check it out. You can have them all. You can be an effective leader from that place. But if you're not using these things, then it's limiting your impact. And an effective leader, we need effective leaders to have a tremendous impact. Competence number 3. Let's talk about competence number 3, which is analytical thinking, and critical thinking. Analytical and critical thinking. Now, a leader who understands the importance of analysis knows that data is king. And let me tell you why I say this. Because often we get all, caught up in these conversations from an emotional place. We start talking about the unfortunate things that are happening in our communities from a defeated place, when sometimes we don't even realize that when we look at the data, we're actually winning. Data is king, and critical thinking is so necessary. A leader that people will follow is not a leader that's moving just with emotion. Now, there has to be some type of emotional component to inspire and motivate people. But I think we have nowadays we have a lot more rah-rah and than data. Hardcore data that person can use. Let me tell you something. You can and rah-rah all day, but you can mention powerful data in a whisper, and that will impact me more. And many of our leaders aren't mining data. They're not looking through scattered information proficiently because they don't know how. And many of them aren't understanding the links between the data and how they can use that to create the strategy for the future that fosters the health of the people. Right? If I'm following someone, I want to know that they are an analytical, critical thinker. I don't want to follow a leader into war that reacts off emotion. I don't want to do that. The number, brother, is 312-374-8130. I don't want to do that. That's not what I want. So I want a leader that is analytical. I want a leader that is critical. I want a leader who is looking at these who has a competence in looking at these things and drawing some level of conclusion that will benefit the health of me, my family, my economic affairs, and my legacy. Number 4, which is self-improvement. I'm going to tell you something. If you are following someone and there's no proof, they're not talking about how they're developing themselves, you need to run. You need to get up out of there. Run for your life, because it is imperative. It is imperative that any leader that is leading people, they must be constantly developing themselves. There must be some evidence of their development. They should be striving to be an expert around whatever it is that they do. Okay? They should have an in-depth business and industry acumen for whatever it is that they're doing. Okay? They should have a high level of emotional intelligence. We talked about that last week. And at the very least, they should be following those 6 characteristics we talked about last week of an effective leader. If they can't do that, I'm telling you, they're not leading you to the right place. They're not, I promise you, they're not leading you to the right place. If that leader is not respecting you, if that leader is not listening to you, if that leader is not acting from a place of personal integrity, and personal integrity don't mean you always agree with them, but there's a consistency in terms of their actions, their intentions, and their speaking. And you can see it, right? If that leader is not providing timely feedback and effective coaching, then it may not be a leader you want to follow. Competence number 5 is global intelligence. Global intelligence. Now, let me pause here for a moment, because from a child, I've always been fascinated with the world, fascinated with other cultures and other places. And, I made a declaration even as a child that I would travel the world. And so it's no surprise to me that I've been afforded the opportunities that I've been given to experience almost 50 countries and 350 cities around the globe. But what that's done for me and how that's made an impact on me as a leader is almost unexplainable. I can't. Every time I leave this country and I explore a new place or I go to another place that I've been in another part of the world, it enhances who I am as a leader because it gives me another perspective and it teaches me something new. It teaches me a new way of being. I'll tell you, in Rwanda, I learned a powerful lesson about the people there. And it's not a lesson around the things that you already know. Right now is the month of commemoration over there for 25 years after genocide. And for any Rwandans listening, just want to give honor and respect to that and to the accomplishments you all have made since then. But one of the things I learned was about the culture and the people. And, you sit back and you make these observations and you can come to the conclusions. I'm not going to talk about the conclusion. It was a personal conclusion that I asked the Rwandan about, and I was wrong. But the point is, I learned real quick that I was wrong, that me observing something based on a set of experiences that I had, not having the experience that they have, that when I drew a conclusion and I asked a question about it, I was wrong. And it woke me up. It was a good, slap in the face, hey, man, you don't always know. And you got to be curious. And that's what global intelligence brings. Global intelligence brings a different level of curiosity to your leadership. It sets you up as a leader. When you talk about being a leader that people can follow, it sets you up as a leader where you're not just bringing a perspective about just the little corner in the world that's where you've been. You're bringing a perspective about the globe because we live in a global world. We're providing, whether you believe it or not, global messages, right? And so in order for you to fully be a leader that people can follow, that people can get behind, you have to understand the globe. Especially black folks, especially us. Why? Because we are being told lies about our own people around the globe. And so you got to know. You got to get in there and study and know what's happening. Because when you begin to understand what's happening, it starts to put a new level of hope inside of you, a new level of inspiration and motivation around what we can accomplish here. I'll say it again. Hey, when I went to Rwanda, it made me realize that everything that we've encountered here, we can overcome. We can overcome it. What it takes is unity. And that's something they have. Global intelligence. And then number 6, you have to be inclusive. Now, WVON is 93% of us are African American listeners. And when I talk about this, typically I'm talking about this to a crowd where the majority are Caucasian. And then you have a few Hispanic and African American leaders or black leaders in the audience. But I want to talk about inclusion with us, brown people, because sometimes we can be the most divisive among ourselves. We can lack this competence. And by the way, it's a competence. It's a way of being. See, you have to have a skill set. You have to have the skill set of inclusion to be able to adequately collaborate. You have to know how to bring in different opinions and different ideas as a leader, because often the people that follow us have competencies that we can use. I get emails sometimes of recommendations. Linal, I follow you. I listen to the show. Have you thought about this? I don't just wipe those things off. I don't go, oh, man, you don't know what you're talking about. Who are you? What do you do? No, I really listen to what's happening. I read and I think about it, because that's practicing inclusion. And often the people who we lead know exactly what it takes for them to follow. And all we have to do is just ask, hey, what do you want to hear? What do you want to learn? Not just that, here's where we're about to go. And this is the vision. And we're not going to deviate from that. But do you have any ideas on how we can get there? Right now, there are four generations that are actively making an impact in this world. You have our traditionalists. And you say traditionalists ain't making an impact. Well, Donald Trump, President Trump, is a traditionalist. Traditionalists are making an impact, and they're still making laws, okay? Then you have baby boomers. Then you have Generation X, which is the generation I belong to. And then you have millennials. And if you're a leader and you're not able to include and lead all four of those generations, then you're in trouble. You're in trouble. If your business is you're not able to successfully employ all four generations, you're in trouble, because a traditionalist brings something different. They got that history, right? They bring something different to the table. They may not have all the technical savvy, but they should have some. But they may not have it all. I mean, think about this in terms of technically savvy, a leader that people will follow. Donald Trump is a traditionalist, and you can't tell me he's not savvy with Twitter. As a matter of fact, he's made a tremendous impact using technology. So here's a man. I mean, you all, let me tell you something. Sometimes we get so caught up on people, we can't sit back and take and listen and watch them and say, what are they doing that's so effective? But some of the things I'm talking about here, he does. And he is a leader that people follow. Whether you like it or not, he's got a following. He's doing these things. Now, I don't know how inclusive he is, which is why you see the breakdowns of his administration. OK. All right. But nonetheless, he's bringing some of these. Almost 12% of U.S. residents come from other countries. So when we talk about inclusion, how are you handling your business? Let me tell you something. In terms of my revenue, 20% of my revenue comes from other countries. 20% of my clients come from other countries. When I look at my membership, got members from different countries, Australia, Mexico, different places, right? And if you want to understand why we're in the political environment we're in, it's because 1 million immigrants cross our borders every year, and they're trying to plug that up. Why are they trying to plug that up? Because most of the immigrants that cross the borders vote a particular type of way when they become citizens. They're trying to plug it up. See, but again, you have to understand the now, right now, to understand where we're going and what certain parties are trying to do and how they're trying to recreate the future. They got a vision for the future, and they're working their vision for the future. Are you? Then you have, I want you to understand this, cross-cultural interaction. And cross-cultural interaction, by the way, is not just among, one person or another. All right. It's not just among, let's say, blacks and whites. It's also among Hispanic, Asian, but also African. All right. There's a different culture that our African brothers and sisters come from. They come from a different background. I had a conversation with a Nigerian brother, helping him understand why African Americans are in the place that they are, because they can't understand it. I don't understand. But part of it is they're not able to cross-culturally integrate, right? What has happened to us? When I began to explain our history and how the government has poured drugs into our community, how they locked up our fathers, and why we're in the situation we're in, it's like, oh, right? And let me tell you something. I told him, I said, you can't tell me about my people the same way I can't tell you about yours. Right? But he sat and listened because he understood that in the future, he needed to have the ability to have a cross-cultural interaction with black people that he didn't have before. And cross-cultural interaction will rise from where it is right now, about 30%, for anybody who is in business. You should be interacting with 30% of people you interact with should be outside of your race. If you're just going to be doing level business right now. Okay. If you're going to be doing level business right now, let me tell you something. One of the reasons why our businesses fail is because we're looking to only do business with us, which is good, but you have to be working on your business, creating a business that provides excellence to the point where other people want to do business with you outside your race. And let me tell you why for the future. By 2050, which is not that far, it's 30 years from now, 70% of your interactions, if you're in business, are going to be with people of other cultures. 70%. And why is that? Well, we talked about it. The robotic era is coming, artificial intelligence. And so that means that we're going to be getting into more creative fields where I'm creating things. And in order for me to do business adequately, to take care of my family, I have to be prepared for those cross-cultural interactions. The churches, you have to be prepared for cross-cultural interactions. It's not just a message to one people, it's a message to all people, right? Business, you have to be prepared for cross-cultural interactions. Small business, you have to be prepared for cross-cultural interactions. Competency number 6 is inclusion. Now, here's the last competence. And it's likely one of the most difficult. But this competence is the competence of saying no. People don't like to hear no. And the most ineffective leaders are leaders that don't know how to say no. And let me tell you something. Some of them are saying no, but they're not saying no, and people won't follow them because they don't know how to say no, because they do it passively. Can't respect that. You have to say no, but then you also have to articulate why. I've shared this too with pastors. That it's one of, in my opinion, I'm not just picking on pastors, I'm picking on business leaders overall, but I know it's Easter Sunday. In my opinion, one of the major fails of the church is not explaining why. You can't say no and not say why. It's demoralizing, and then people don't understand. People don't understand. But you have to say no. No is necessary. No is necessary. And so you have to know how to say no, and you have to know how to articulate that why. If you don't know why, then it's important as leaders we find out why. We do the research. We get the understanding on why, so people know why we're saying no when they follow. But here's the other thing in saying no. You have to say no to fighting fire. Sometimes you have to dedicate time to just focusing on strategy, because strategy is what the future is all about. You have to know how to say no to fighting fires. And then you also have to know how to stop old work and start meaningful new work. And that's one of the hardest things, because many of us will get caught in the wheel. We'll be doing the same thing over and over again, over and over again, over and over again, over and over again, without switching it up. And the meaningful new work is the work that will take us towards our vision. And so as a leader, what do you need to say no to? What is something that you need to say no to, so that way you can begin working on the vision, creating the vision, building on the vision? And you have to have a strategic, inclusive delegation. You have to say no to always working and say yes to building strategy. And let me tell you, as someone who works with many executives, one of the major opportunities for most leaders is spending time on strategy. My recommendation is that you should be spending 20% of your time on strategy. Is it easy? No. That's why, they got the book, Eat the Frog First. Then you need to be working on your strategy first. First thing I do in the morning is work out. But after that, when I get in the house and after I take my son to school, then I sit down, I open up my planner, and I don't start any work until I do strategy. I plan the day. Then I look at how the plan is going to affect the month and all the things that I want to do. And then I plan, and then I look at where it's going to be for the year, my yearly timeline. As a matter of fact, April is my strategy month when I build out my strategy for 2019, in the beginning of 2020. So this whole month has been dedicated to strategy, talking to my coach about strategy, talking to my peers about strategy. Why? Because that's how I'm going to build the future. And the only way to adequately do that is I have to have the competence to say no. Hey, Linal, can you come over here and speak to our young people for a while? No, this is strategy month. It's just as important as if I were working head on something that was on fire right now. Just as important. Building strategy. How do you think that I gain this insight that I can share? I'm gaining this insight I can share because I say no to fighting fires and yes to strategy. So I'm reading, I'm studying, I'm trying to figure out what's next, what's going to happen next, what's coming next, so I can focus on strategy. And the other thing that strategy does is it helps you see, here's what I'm going to need for the future. Right now, I got 3 job positions that based on where I know I need to take my organization, I'm writing those job descriptions right now. So that way, when I have the need, I'm not like, oh man, what am I going to do? No, I'm writing it right now. Strategy. But in order to focus on strategy, you have to know how to say no. How to say no. And if you don't know how to say no, it's going to be very difficult for you to create a strategy as a leader that will help people go to the place that you envision for them. And even if you have these other 6 competencies and they follow you, you will disappoint the people. You will disappoint them and you will disappoint yourself, because strategy is the only way that leaders can get there. James Baldwin, the great James Baldwin said, know from whence you came, talking about the past. We opened up with that. If you know from whence you came, there are absolutely no limitations to where you can go. Know from whence you came. If you know from whence you came, there are absolutely no limitations to where you can go. And I firmly believe that for all of us. I really do. And for those of us who aspire to be leaders that people can follow, it's important that we know not just our past, but we're clear on the vision for the future, and we know how to lead them through the now. All right. Well, we got a few questions here on Facebook, so I'm going to spend some time answering some of those questions from what we just talked about. The first question says, how can a leader start evolving into what they need to be when they are already leading people? And I think that's a phenomenal question. And what I would say to that question is it has to be a continual, self-development has to be continual. So even as you're leading people, you should be learning. You should be, and I talked about it last week, but an inspirational leader is someone who's authentic and vulnerable. And so I tell you guys when I'm going to conferences, when I'm learning, I tell you guys I'm getting coached. I mean, you all know that I'm being developed week over week over week. Why? Because to me, that's just a form of being a responsible leader, right? And so any leader should be able to say, hey, you all, I don't know everything, and I'm looking to learn as much as I possibly can. So I'm constantly improving myself. And often what we believe as leaders is actually counterintuitive in terms of how it impacts people. I believe that it will in many ways encourage people to follow. I got another question here from Cassandra Sneed on Facebook, and the question she had is, how do you feel about 2053 eliminating black wealth? And here's what I have to say about that. That comes from, I believe, an article and some work that was done around the decrease in black wealth and how overall we haven't moved in terms of home ownership. I mean, it hasn't moved. In terms of overall economic wealth, it has moved, but it's not necessarily in banks, right? And what I say to that is, yes, Cassandra, if we stay on the same trajectory, by all means, there could be an elimination of black wealth, right? However, that is why we as leaders have to have a vision. We have to have a vision for where we see our community, and we can't act on what's around us or what the current environment may say, because that's what leaders are for. Leaders are to lead the people out of the current circumstance into something new. And so part of the work that I'm doing, for instance, with the transformational tour of Ghana, with the work around the Black Identity series I did last year that I will be bringing back in May, right? Around this work, part of what I'm doing is what I feel is necessary for us to begin to learn what's important for us as a people, so we can begin curbing what the data says or what the predictors may be. Let me tell you something. Black wealth is not decreasing. It's increasing. Right now, today, we are sitting in a place where we have in our disposal, $1.7 trillion a year coming into our households. The problem is it's going right back out of our households to people that don't care about us, like Prada, like Gucci, like Louis Vuitton. Let me tell you something. I get sick to my stomach when I see people in social media and in selfies and Instagrams with these products, because it's an indication that we're not keeping our wealth. We have these same products being manufactured in Africa. And I believe the answer to black folks in America is partnering with our African brothers and sisters and beginning to sell their products and the things that are made over there as black businesses over here. And that should be the new Gucci. That should be the new Louis Vuitton. That should be the new Prada, because it's made by us, for us, and then we're wearing it too. So we're wearing it. What's for us, by us, is also on our backs. And then that dollar is going in and throughout our community over and over again. And that could be the sustaining portion for black wealth. But as long as that dollar is going somewhere else, then yeah, black wealth will go. And so we have to have a new vision. That's part of my vision, which is why I'm doing work in Africa, and why I'm asking you guys to join me on the transformational tour of Ghana, which is coming up October 24th. So if anything, I can influence you to do the same. And again, you can go to murdermediocrity.com to learn more about that.
Join Linal Harris every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. here on WVON 1690 AM.